Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. My name is Robert Llewellyn. I am the founder and one of the presenters of the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric channel here on YouTube and also on audio feeds from your podcast downloading app, however you choose to do it. We do these shows every week. We interview people from all around the world, very importantly, from all different walks of life, on a very wide variety of topics related to electric ground transport, clean energy, the energy transition, etc. But it's really worth subscribing to if you haven't before, or checking out previous episodes, of which there are many. We've been doing this for many years. The Fully Charged Show on YouTube is now over 14 years old, so we've been doing this a while, and we've got a very comprehensive grasp of what is going on in this arena. And one of the people that we've met on this fascinating journey is today's guest, who is such a lovely guy, Ben Sullins. He lives in California in the United States of America. He's a sort of data technician and an economist, and he understands how economies and companies work and how companies make money or fail to make money, and he's followed a lot of the American incredible innovation that's come out of particularly California in the last 10, 15 years in connection with electric vehicles and renewable energy. Truly fascinating history he's had as well. We met through the sort of 10, 12 years ago was a very small niche of interest in this area, and it has grown enormously in that time. And he's been running a YouTube channel called Ben Sullins Official. And he now does a really lovely podcast, which I've only just caught up about, which is the Daily Charge Up podcast. Really nice idea. It's really short, and it just has 4 or 5 really interesting stories that he knows about, and he just does. It's just him, and it's like the commitment to listening to a podcast is as minimum as it can get, and it's really interesting stuff. I've subscribed to it because it's so quick. While you wash up your coffee cup in the morning, you can listen to the whole thing. And he's just a fascinating guy. And I just wanted to catch up because I think that we do mention a little bit, in a very non-partisan way, a little bit of politics at the beginning of this episode, because there's a lot of politics going on in the United States at the moment. A lot of it has quite strong connections to the opinions about things like electric vehicles, things like renewable energy, and how finally most people are accepting that it's just possible some of the stuff we're doing might be affecting the climate just a teensy weensy bit. Not a lot. Don't want to push my luck. Just a tiddly corner tiny bit. So we do discuss many of those topics today, but it's a great ramble through what's been going on recently. We have Ben was at our most recent show in America in San Diego, and obviously we'd love to do more shows in America, and hopefully we will at some point. And Ben is such a brilliant addition to that because he's so knowledgeable about particularly the American electric vehicle scene. So that's it. Our next live show is in Vancouver in September. I've got it right here. The 6th, 7th and 8th of September at the Vancouver Convention Centre, which is an amazing building, and it's going to be huge, much bigger than last year. We've got so many more car companies coming, so many more fascinating home energy companies are on display there, and we know there's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be an amazing event. Do come if you can, if you're in the Pacific Northwest region of the North American continent. There we go. I'm as broad as possible with the least amount of geopolitics. Just simple geography. That's happening then. We then have a show in Farnborough in October, the beginning of October in the UK. And then after that, it's Sydney, Australia. There we go, mate. So I think I've told you all the things I needed to tell you. I had a little list. I always forget something. That's fine. Let's welcome Ben Sullins to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Ben, this is such fun. I love catching up with you, and thank you very much for finding time to do this, because I think there would have been a time maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago before we had our recent general election here where I just was so tired of all things political and I just didn't want to talk about any of it. it was all, and then all the news we were getting here about President Biden, and his speech and all that stuff. I just went, I want to shut all that off. I don't want to think about it. But actually, what's happened in the last week, I guess, is one, we had an election and we had a really big change in our government, and
I heard that. Yeah.
I mean, it's been. I mean, I don't think you can notice it yet, but there's definitely a different feel. I've talked to a couple of people and this is to do with business and general business interactions have become a slightly more positive. Not, I don't think because of the color of the politics, but the fact that it's changed and it was in such a mess before, and it was so confusing, and no one knew who was doing what, and it was just a lot of crumbling. It was the end of days, crumbling political party that's completely fallen to bits now.
Yeah.
But also the most recent news about President Biden stepping down from the next presidential election, and it kind of changes the flavor and the color. I mean, I don't want to have any opinions about American politics because I know they'll be wrong and they'll upset someone. So I don't want to have opinions, but it is intriguing. And your very recent video about Trump's attitude to electric vehicles is fascinating and a really interesting analysis. Can you give us a kind of background to how, I just love that kind of analysis you gave of how we've had incentives, which we've had the same in this country, for oil, for gas, for coal. We had definitely in this country tax breaks and incentives and completely understandable, to encourage the development of those energy products. I mean, that's nothing new at all, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Trump recently at one of the conventions said that he's going to end the EV mandate. And I thought that was interesting. Like you, I really, especially on my show and stuff, I don't like to bring politics into it, but sometimes it forces itself into the discussion. And so I felt maybe I had something to add to that discussion. And the idea was like, okay, so first off, there's no such thing as the EV mandate. I think you actually have one there in the UK, don't you? Like 2035 or something. Everything must be electric.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So we actually don't have that here federally. In California and in many other states we do. So, because we kind of operate in a little different mode, but there is no official thing like that. So I just assume he means the federal tax credit, which knocks off $7,500 from the price, or $4,000 for a used EV, which is great. I think it's super important. So the question I thought was, all right, I try to look at where we're at now with electric being the main source of power for almost everything in our lives, or becoming more so every day, as energy. I don't necessarily look at it as, gas versus batteries and solar and all that. Like, so renewables and oil and gas, I feel like, are the sources of energy. How we use that energy is becoming far more efficient. But I think it's a fair point that depending on which state you're in the United States, your electric car still produces carbon because it gets it from a coal-fired power plant or whatever. Now, granted, we can talk forever, and I know you have, and we agree on this completely, that it's still a better deal, even if that's 100% true. It's still a better deal for the planet, for the people, and all that. But
it's a compromise for sure.
Yeah.
If all your power's coming from a coal-burning power plant, there's a good argument about
right. So let's just set aside that for a second and say what is the history of energy subsidies in the United States, and how has this worked? So that was the angle I took in the video, was kind of exploring the history of it first to set the stage, because I think a lot of people on the internet that get real angry about, say, an electric vehicle getting a tax break or whatever, don't really have the context. So, and learning from you, I know we've talked about storytelling and filmmaking before. The simplest form is the 3-act structure. So you have the setup, the conflict, and the resolution. So in the video, I always try to follow that in my videos. This one, I kind of laid it out more directly, like part 1, the history, so that we all have a foundation of which to then understand where we're going. And then, so that was the basis of the videos. I wanted to bring that to this discussion instead of just who's getting what incentives and who's paying for what. And we shouldn't be putting our thumb on the scale here and there. And it's like, well, we've been doing that forever. The government drives, and there was a lot of that video I took out, as I'll shoot for hours and I'll come out with a 7-minute video. So there was a lot I cut out of that video just because as
Right.
I was watching it, I got
Yeah.
bored of myself talking. And I said, no
Yeah.
one cares. But one of the things was there, in fact, before the first oil or energy incentive that I talked about in that video, there was actually one called the Smith-Lever Act of 1914. I might do a whole video on this. I know
Yeah.
nobody will watch it, so I can't.
I will, Ben. You'll
You
get
will.
one view.
That's enough. That's enough. The Smith-Lever Act of 1914 in the United States, which, for maybe listeners of your podcast that are in the UK or whatever, 1914 to us is ancient history, right?
Yeah.
That's as old as we go back. That's as far as we go back in terms of history. So 1914, there was a thing called the Smith-Lever Act, which was to help farmers learn about new technologies to make their crops, to make more food, to make it more
Wow.
efficient. So at the time, they were using donkeys, plows, whatever farm animals they could. And there was this new fancy technology the government was really hot on pushing called a tractor.
Right.
And so
Wow.
they had these education programs and incentives to use tractors and stuff. And that whole research, that whole path, came to me from a comment that someone said, we never had to convince farmers to use tractors. Why do we have to convince people to use electric vehicles?
Yeah.
And I went down the path of that's actually wrong. In fact, so the government has been, at least in the US and probably all around the world, whenever there's something that they see as having a societal benefit, in that case, producing more food more efficiently.
Yeah.
And in other cases, it's switching to renewables. In other cases, it's like the incentives for energy here in the U.S. in the early 1900s when they started coming out. We were producing 7% of the economy was oil and gas. At the end of that, across 50 years later, it was something like 70%. So it hugely increased. So what the government wants to incentivize for whatever benefit, and whoever decides what that benefit is, that's separate. That's a political side. But whatever they decide is, they absolutely put their thumb on the scale. And so are EVs getting an overly generous deal here? No, not at all. And in fact, if you look even to this day, how much subsidies go to oil and gas, I think there's some groups out there that study it. It's in the trillions of dollars. And so you look at that and you go, all right, so let's calm down about a few $1,000s, for the few, not even a large amount of sales. I mean, I think US were maybe 7% of new car sales are electric, which I think is fantastic, but it's such a small number.
It is still a small number. So that's over the entire US, because certain states where it would be way higher than that, I'm assuming. But
I think California is upwards of 20, maybe last time I saw.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that was the gist of the video is, yes, there's politicians getting involved in this. And so I want to talk about it. And that was what I wanted to bring to that discussion was, I don't know, more holistic approach. And then, where we go from here. And the biggest head scratcher of all that is how Elon is supporting someone who is coming out directly against his own interests.
Yes, that is baffling. Well, I mean,
don't quite get that.
Let me read this little. This is a quote from a newsletter called Heat Map.
Okay,
I've got to double check. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is called. Which follows a lot of renewable energy and electric ground transport topics in the broadest possible way. But this is a quote from President Trump. This is what he said earlier this month, so very recently. I have no objection to the electric vehicle, the EV. I think it's great. I'm not going to even try. I can't do a Trump impression. I wish I could, but I can't. Trump told Bloomberg early this month, shortly after promising to end Biden's non-existent EV mandate on day one in office. So that's quite a good line. His improved mood still came with caveats, but it seemed to be part of a larger trend. I'm totally for electric cars, whatever the market says. Trump followed up with with a crowd in Grand Rapids, Michigan over the weekend. If it's 10% of the market, 12%, 7%, 20%, whatever it is, it's okay. So could you possibly, this is what they were implying in this article, is it possible to read into the fact that Elon Musk has promised, gazillions in a sense towards the Trump campaign? Could that have tipped it? Speaking to someone earlier on, they decided that it was actually Elon Musk was actually a left-wing activist, tree-hugging a secret agent that was posing and he was actually influencing it, anyway. It is so weird. The whole thing is so baffling.
That's 100% it. I mean, and in my video, that's sort of the conclusion I came to, was like,
Right. Yeah.
maybe Elon is playing the long game here, and he knows that Trump has a history of flip-flopping on issues, on
Yes.
very serious issues, bigger,
Yeah.
like his political party and his stance on abortion, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be unimaginable that if Elon started kind of greasing the wheels for him, that he would, flip flop on this and say,
Yeah.
actually, EVs are great, and we need to do that. And not to get political about it, but I think conservatives in the U.S., which is at the Labor Party for you guys, the more right wing side,
Yeah.
um, they should love electric vehicles. Honestly,
Well.
for one, most of them here in the U.S. are built here or are
Yeah.
more American than, say, Ford and Chevy. Um, but that's a different thing. So if they're really heavy on this populist nationalist identity, hey, these things are the most American vehicles you can buy, for
Yeah.
one. And second off, we don't import electricity from Saudi Arabia or from
No.
Canada or anywhere else. And despite the US being the largest single oil producing country in the world, we still import something like 30 to 40% of our gasoline and our refined petroleum products. So
Wow.
we actually export more than we consume,
Then
but
you.
we still import, and mostly from Canada. I don't think it's
Right.
any from the OPEC countries, because that's how they got in trouble back in the 70s
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the oil embargo and the gas crisis. But point being, your coal worker is the guy that makes the energy for your electric
Yes.
car. He is
Yeah.
not the guy. So the oil worker, most of what he's making is getting exported
It's
somewhere
getting
else.
exported.
So if you want
Yeah.
to, so they're American made, and the energy they use has to come from your local, energy sources.
Yeah.
We're not importing truckloads of batteries from Saudi Arabia or anything.
No.
So I don't understand why conservatives, if they were to look at the facts of it and the logic of it, why they don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's kind of the source of the argument in the video I made too, was tribalism is in human nature. It's how we've survived. It's how we've evolved. So tribalism is nothing. No one can escape it. I'm not immune. You're not immune.
No.
No one listening is immune. We all have our bubbles. We all have our tribes. So that, I think, is what's at play here. At some point, the narrative came that EVs were bad, and if you're a conservative, you should hate EVs. And so Trump is up there just saying, I hate EVs,
Yeah.
because he knows that's what they want to hear. And as far as
Yes.
he's concerned, all that matters right now is to get elected. Like
Yeah.
most politicians, right? It's like job one is to get elected, job two is to get reelected. That's it.
Yeah.
Like everything else is is
Everything
kind of
else is
whatever.
negotiable. Yeah.
Yes, everything else is. So that's kind of my summation. I don't know if there's, but that's fascinating to hear. I didn't hear that quote before.
No,
I'm
I've
not
only just found
surprised.
that today. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not surprised.
But then the other, I think the other one that I'm slightly baffled by, and this is very non-partisan because it crosses the political spectrum, but that there should be enormous pride in America that for the first time in, we're talking 60 or 70 years, a new automotive company, manufacturing company has emerged out of the valley of a really unexpected place, not the traditional way, and become incredibly globally successful.
Yeah.
And absolutely transformed the global automotive world. And you can now argue that the follow-on companies, mainly in China, are getting equally big, equally successful. But boy, they didn't start it. It was started in America by American engineers in American factories, in American design shops, with Americans making, that should be the biggest tub-thumping, flag-waving thing. And
Exactly.
yet what I found fascinating was really early in the Biden administration, there was shots of President Biden in, I think, in a Ford F-150 electric or a Hummer, I don't even know what it was, saying, hey, this baby really shifts or something. And then he talked to, I think, a GM plant, saying GM were at the absolute forefront of the electric vehicle revolution. You go, it doesn't matter what your political opinions are, this guy is kind of missed the point. And I understand it's because of unionization, and it wasn't a union, Tesla. But you just cannot say that and then go, it's just wrong. Who started the electric vehicle revolution? Was it GM, Ford, Toyota, Nissan? Was it? You could argue almost Nissan-ish, but then no one. BMW, no. Mercedes, forget it. No, it was Tesla.
That's it. I agree. I mean, and like you, I think we give them all the credit in the world for what they've
Yeah.
been able to do. Absolutely, no one else would be pushing electric as hard if it weren't
No.
for Tesla and what they did. I mean,
Yeah.
so I give them a lot of credit on that. I mean, I may not agree with the CEO of Tesla's opinion on everything,
No.
but I
Oh,
certainly
no.
agree that their products, even to this day, are still some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
I really liken it to the iPhone, because when the iPhone came out, it changed people's perception of what a
Yeah.
smartphone could be.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually innovate. It was They didn't
No.
invent anything new. Just like Tesla didn't invent anything new.
No.
They just combined everything in such a wonderful, sort of innovative way that it shifted people's minds about it. And then
Yeah.
that's where the momentum came from. Just like the smartphone. I mean, every smartphone that's out there today is essentially a copy of an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
And had Apple not done that, we wouldn't have smartphones like we do today. And so it's the same deal, I feel, and this is where I still feel a lot, and I get a lot of press cars where they let me drive them for a week.
Yeah.
And I don't I don't post about a lot of them because I don't want to be super negative about an electric car.
Right.
But so many of them still miss the point. They still feel like a BlackBerry in an iPhone world, you know?
I've
You get
not
in
thought
a
of that. It's absolutely.
you get in a Tesla and you're like, this is the
Yeah.
future. Oh my God, look at what is this incredible. And then you get in any of these, not any, but a lot of these other ones, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's
Yeah.
electric. Like I had an Audi e-tron, and Audi makes fantastic cars,
Yeah.
German engineering and all that. Nothing to knock them, but it definitely felt like, oh, my dad would love this. It
Yes.
didn't
Yes.
feel like, oh, I'm in the future. It felt like, oh,
Yeah.
is this electric? I don't know. I can't tell. So I think
Yeah.
like, Tesla definitely deserves the credit for changing the world's perspective on this and driving this move, really creating the spark that is now the massive inferno.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I agree. Conservatives, Trump, all these guys should absolutely love Tesla and love
Yeah.
electric cars.
Well, maybe
Because,
I mean, that might be what's happening as well. That's the other flip side of the Musk plan.
yeah,
It might be that suddenly, if you want to really show your red MAGA hat and everything, you buy a Tesla because that's
hmm
the ultimate American dream.
yeah,
And then if you're on the other side of the coin, you'll drive anything but. I mean, I've had so many. Well, if we mention Tesla in any way, it doesn't even matter what we say. There's always someone who's really angry that we've
yeah.
mentioned Tesla, or the other way around is, why do you hate Tesla?
hmm
I drive one every day.
That's right. That's right. Do you have the Model 3 still, or did
Got
you
the
get a
Model
Model
3.
Y?
And
Yeah.
it's just I have full issues with Elon Musk about
Yeah.
many of his opinions, but it's just a really good car. I mean, it doesn't, it's really energy efficient.
Yeah.
The other day I did a long drive and I got over 5 miles to the kilowatt hour. It was nice, warm
Amazing.
for England. It was a warm day. It was unusual. Well, I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do. Bright, shiny thing in sky. Didn't really know what to make of it.
It,
But
it,
it's incredible that a car that size can get that kind of energy
Yeah.
efficiency. This is on a freeway. This is on I
yeah.
don't know what, a couple of 100 miles journey.
It brings up the question, the fundamental question of, can you separate the art from the artist?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who say don't like Tom Cruise movies because they don't like Tom Cruise.
Right.
Well, I grew up in the era of the original Top Gun and all that, so I will always
Yeah.
love Tom Cruise. I don't care how crazy he becomes or whatever; it doesn't matter to me. And I
No.
think that's the fundamental question that people struggle with when it comes to Tesla specifically. Like, I don't think anyone cares who or what the CEO of Volkswagen is doing. Nobody.
No.
Like, we might know
even
who that
know.
is, but
Yeah.
99 out of 100 people have
Yeah.
no clue who that person is,
Yeah.
and they don't care. But because Tesla and Elon are so intertwined with his personality and the brand, I
Yeah.
think that's where people have a hard time. They either love him or hate him, and so that directly influences
Yeah.
their opinion on. In fact, in my video we were talking about, tons of comments. I sold my Tesla because I can't support
Right.
this guy, or
Yeah.
So it's a fundamental question. Can we separate the art from the artist? If so, then I think we have to agree that their cars are incredible.
Yeah.
If you don't like, so if we can't do that, if you're saying, hey, no, whoever runs this thing, I have to like in order for me
Yeah.
to like their products, then that's a different question entirely. So,
I think
but
it would
yeah, it's
make
a fundamental.
it would make your general purchasing decisions really complicated, because you might find out, the boss of, I don't know, like a big food company or a big supermarket company is like, oh my God, I can't go to Walmart anymore. I mean, there's so many places you can't go.
Yeah, right.
It's very but I mean, I think the other thing, because I always argued way long ago, simply because the people I met in the early days of Tesla who were connected with Tesla, I did meet Elon Musk once for 2 seconds, so I don't know, not at all big deal. But I met one or two of the other engineers and scientists and designers who worked on the early Tesla days. And that's who I always, I say, no, yeah, you can talk about the guy. Yes, he's he's always doing this. But the act, what I think I would still defend for him is his choice of people, if indeed he was involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
But the choice of people he got to work for him, and the fact that the company attracted those people, that's who built the cars. He did not do the battery management software. That wasn't written by Elon Musk. He might have found the guy who was really, really good at writing the battery management software, and all those areas.
That's the skill that I think a true leader adds, or the value that a true leader adds, is attracting the right people, because no one person can be an expert at everything. This, honestly, this same line of thinking as what is sort of made me a huge Rivian fanboy at this point.
Right.
And I am completely okay saying that publicly.
You've come out as a Rivian fanboy.
100%. I am completely biased. Anytime you see me do a review of a Rivian, just know I am completely biased. And it's largely because I've gotten to know a lot of them, and I mean, a lot of them are ex-Tesla as well, but because of what they've been able to do with the brand and the people and everything they do, is still at this point is so aligned with, I guess, my own values and identity, that I'm like, you could do whatever. You could sell me a $300 flashlight and I would be like, this is the best flashlight. It doesn't matter, And so, but I think that's what actually made Tesla successful in the early days, was the hype around Elon and what he was doing.
Sure.
It brought all those people there. And I feel like Rivian, I don't know if RJ Scaringe has that same, pizzazz or whatever. He doesn't have that draw like Elon did.
No, but in a sense, that's what makes him rather attractive now.
Yes. Yeah. The fact that he's kind of boring is incredible. But, the guy also has a PhD in automotive manufacturing. I mean, you couldn't have a better guy. You couldn't, design a better human to be that guy. So he's fantastic. And so I've become a huge Rivian fanboy basically because of that, because of the brand and because of the people.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I couldn't help noticing that around the time that the Cybertruck was the first deliveries were made.
Yeah.
Rivian announced the R2, the smaller, and I just looked at that, and honestly, I was actually kind of genuinely emotionally upset, because I thought that is what Tesla should be launching now, not the Cybertruck. But because it was that's what without question, we can tell it just from views. If we put out as you say, something like an Audi, a big Audi or a big Mercedes electric vehicle that costs £70,000 to £100,000, like that, it gets views and people, but it's not big. If we put out the Dacia Spring or the little small electric car, it goes off the scale. The views and the response to it is so positive. And when we have those cars at our live shows, they're completely surrounded by people wanting to know more about them, and the test drives are off the scale, all that stuff. And that's why it's so heartbreaking that Tesla could have launched a really good, smaller, lighter, cheaper hatchback. I'm sure they can, and I'm sure they will maybe one day, but it is so, because have you seen that Rivian in the metal? I mean, I haven't. I've only seen pictures of it.
Yeah. I was there at the event.
Right.
Got to hang out with RJ and team for a little bit and have a close-up view of it. It was fantastic. I mean,
wow.
The R2, I think, is going to be the Model Y for them. It's going to really, solidify their position in the auto world. They're still a very niche, tiny automaker in sort of the number of units they sell.
Can you just quickly get? I mean, I have no idea because we can't get them here, so it's still a distant longing I have for a review. But I mean, I don't know what numbers they've actually sold. I don't know how many of them are on the road.
I think this year's projection, or was it last year's, was like 25,000. only.
Right. So it's kind of early days of Model S. That was the sort of numbers that were happening in that time.
Yeah, I think they're going to beat that this year, and the SUV is the one that is far outselling the truck.
Is that right? Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is, and I live in sort of one of the electric vehicle hubs in the world where I see them constant. I mean, in my
Right.
neighborhood, there are 3 Cybertrucks.
Right.
Just
Right.
and I can tell because they're all different colors, right?
Yeah.
But it's so we have every electric vehicle. I see a lot of Mercedes out here. I see a lot of them, but Rivian, yeah, they're I think less than 100,000 units per year still.
Right.
So in terms of auto world, that's
It's very small.
really
Yeah.
small. Yeah, I mean Porsche is probably one of the biggest automakers that sells the fewest number of
Yes.
units, and they sell like 300,000 a year.
Right.
So they're still way down there. But the R2, when that comes out, I mean, I can tell you just from I know it's anecdotal and I'm a data guy and I shouldn't do this, but literally every person I talk to about Rivian, that's all they want to know about is the R2. They don't care because the other ones are too expensive. They're too big.
Yeah.
They're not that for us in America, they're not too big, but there is a much larger market for the smaller SUV than there is for the larger SUV.
Yeah.
And so it's fantastic. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am for that. I'm going to hopefully replace my wife's Model Y with that.
Right.
Because by the time,
I don't know when's that due to hit
2026.
2026. Okay.
So, and people were upset about that. I thought that was odd. People were really like, "Oh, I can't wait 2 years," and it's like you've been waiting 4 years for a Cybertruck, and what do you mean? Like 2 years is essentially tomorrow. It'll be here before you know it. So I'm hoping to replace my wife's Model Y with that, and that'll be nice. I still love the Model Y, but we got it in 2020. It's a bit long, long in the tooth. So.
But that was the other thing that you mentioned that I thought I must ask you about. That was you can get a I don't know what you call, I can't remember what it is. I was going to call it a rebate. It's not, but assistance to buy a second-hand electric vehicle. There's a
tax credit.
Tax credit. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. I think it actually. Yeah, I don't know what the right term is. But if in the only challenge, and so here's. Not to get too deep into the politics side of it, but the politicians that design these programs have to decide what they care about. Do they care about getting votes and playing towards a certain demographic, or do they care about the climate? Because sometimes those are in opposition. So an example is if right now in the U.S. the way that the tax credit works is if the vehicle is above $80,000, you don't get any credit whatsoever.
Right.
So guess what? Everyone just dropped their prices to
79,999
right there, and so for used, right. And so again, it's like, if you really care about the climate, why that's a stupid, that is anti-climate, because now really you should just get every vehicle being electric. You don't care what the price is. Who cares?
Yeah.
And so then, on the used side, this is where it's kind of a tricky one. It has to be below $25,000.
Right.
So, and the credit's $4,000. So it's a pretty good deal. I mean, and in fact, at the Hertz website, which is the rental car company, they bought like 100,000 Teslas a couple years back, and they've had issues with them, and they haven't had the best time. So they're offloading a lot of them. And so on their website, you can find a Model 3, even a Model Y I saw for under $25,000, which I think is an absolute steal, and everybody should just buy that. In that case, so that $25,000 Model Y now becomes, at the time of purchase, this was the big change that I think everyone was really happy with. At the time of purchase, you get to apply that to the price.
Right.
So it used to be you had to buy it, whatever the price was.
And then you get a rebate kind of thing.
On the taxes next year, you could deduct that amount. Now, if you didn't owe that much in taxes, then you couldn't deduct the full amount. So it was a really messy, weird system.
Yeah.
But whatever, politicians are humans, and they don't get things right. Like none of us do. So now that $4,000 or that $7,500 get applied at the time of purchase.
Right.
Which is fantastic. So I think this is a great deal. Again, in terms of federal budget for the United States, this is not even a rounding error. Like the total amount of dollars being spent on this is so minuscule, but because it touches people's real lives, I think it has a real outsized space in our brain. Like shark attacks is another example. There's like 5 or 6 shark attacks worldwide per year, but we're all afraid of sharks, and so it's one of those things where it's really like insignificant in a lot of ways, but takes up a lot of real estate in our brains.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, in fact, a shark attack while I was recently in Sydney.
Okay.
Not a fatal one, but quite nasty. And I went down, because I'm not good at swimming in proper Australian sea. Those waves, the waves are the size of a truck, they're too
That's
big.
why they all look like Hemsworths out there. That's why they all look like Thor.
But then I was standing, it's so pathetic. So I was very aware of this story. My wife was diving in, she does, but I stand on the beach holding the towels. That's my job. And I was in the sea up to my ankles, and it crossed my mind, I'm not going to lie, can a shark swim in water this shallow?
Yeah, right. Meanwhile, the car ride you took over there is so infinitely more dangerous. You're infinitely more likely to get harmed just taking your kids to school in the morning than you are
God, don't.
any of these other things. So
yeah, no, it's crazy, isn't it? But the other ones I want to ask you about. So that was the secondhand one is really interesting. Well, I think the only point I wanted to make is when people say, "Oh, electric cars are really expensive," and we now have some on the market in this country from China that are essentially cheaper than any petrol car, brand new electric car. But I mean, they are very compromised. They not big range, but they are. Certainly, if you live in a city, very, very usable and small and easy to use. But it took me a while to realize, that when up until electric cars became a reality, I'd never bought a new car. I mean, I didn't even know people who bought new cars. I always bought secondhand, third-hand cars. I'm talking, many decades ago. I'm very old. But, my first car was fifth hand.
Wow. Yeah.
The first car I bought, but it only cost me £90. So, like maybe $120. So, and it felt a bit constantly. I mean, that's the flip side of the arguments about electric vehicles and, are they reliable and can we rely on the batteries? I buy an old combustion car and literally, as I drove along the road, things would drop off and break and fall apart constantly. I mean, it was a very old car, but the second-hand market, it's really changed here. So it's been a big increase it's in the hundreds of percents increase in second-hand sales for similar reasons. So it's big corporate leasing companies have released a lot of electric vehicles onto the market. They're now 3 and 4 years old, all really well looked after with really good logbooks that, all their servicing history, all that stuff. And they're selling for, very, very reasonable sub £15,000, So in a similar price range, so under $20,000 kind of area.
And what would be great is if these dealers had any sense, and I would love, maybe this is something we could all put together and collaborate on, but put together some way to give the buyer and even the salesman, the salesman, an idea of the true cost of ownership. We have that here on appliances. So if you buy a refrigerator or a water heater, it'll tell you on the side, there's a thing called the Energy Star rating, and it'll say annually you should spend $200 running this appliance or whatever it is. I think it would be great. Maybe Energy Star is the right company for the US and the right company to do it, where they could actually do that and say, oh, this Toyota Corolla, which cost, let's call it $20,000, it costs you, $3,000 a year to run, to fuel and maintain it or whatever. And then this Tesla Model 3 costs you $300 to run.
Yes.
And so we can kind of level set, because there's such a big gap, and it's just not how our brains work. No. One of my favorite, I'm really big into economics, and specifically, this one of the sort of goats, the greatest of all time in the economics world is Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who, if anyone's familiar, they won the Nobel Prize. And one of the books was Thinking Fast and Slow. So in that book,
I've heard of the book. I don't know their names.
So Danny Kahneman, he's him and Amos Tversky are sort of the founders of what's called behavioral economics. And the simplest way to understand that is that we are not rational in our decision making as humans. And they proved this many ways, and that's what got them the Nobel Prize. So when you look at something like a sticker price on a car, it is almost impossible for our brains to comprehend that even though that electric car might be $1,000 more, across a year, across 5 years, you're going to be saving so much money. Because after you've seen those two big numbers, it is impossible for our brains to not bring those to the forefront. So I think in order for if people to understand deeply about the true cost of ownership, we would really have to shift how they're being sold. And
Yeah.
of course, the gas car, the internal combustion vehicles are not going to be excited about this. So I
No.
don't know it would go anywhere, but I would love for that to become a thing where when you look at a vehicle, you don't just look at, it's 20,000 versus 21 or 25. You
Yeah.
look at,
Yeah.
oh, across 5 years, it's really going to be this much versus this much.
Yeah.
Because that I think would help people really grasp how much better electric cars are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, it is the thing that I must admit I'd forgotten. I had to kind of really remind myself and then go back and actually looked at my old, really, you would be so horrified, really badly put together spreadsheets from when I first tried to do spreadsheets. But one of the things that's in there every now and then, I go, oh my God, look at that. It just says car service, £640.
Yeah.
640, go forward a few months, car service, 397. What?
Yeah.
And I look now, well, my Nissan Leaf's a perfect example. And it's not, if you have an electric vehicle, don't do what I did. But it had one service in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because nothing went wrong. I mean, it never
simple.
went very far on a charge, ever. In its life. It still doesn't now. It's still fine, but
Yeah.
I just didn't take it in. So when it doesn't, I think I took it in once when it was very new, and they charged me like £50, and they changed the screen wash fluid and cleaned it.
Yeah.
Went, well, they haven't done anything.
Now, can you take the Nissan Leaf now and charge your house with it? Because I know bidirectional charging is a big thing, and I believe the Nissan Leaf is certified for that.
Yes, I have the correct charger installed in my house, and it's with the CHAdeMO connector, and my Nissan Leaf is too old.
Oh.
So the first generation that mine was built in Japan, so built in 2010. It's really one of the very first ones, and it was a press car. I bought it as a press car, and so no, I can't. But I've had a more recent Nissan Leaf here, and it was hard to judge because I've already got the electronics in my house.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experimentation. And I think there's a bit of crossover. You could probably draw a very complex Venn diagram of all the things that overlap. But I mean, technically, you could see there was power coming out of it, and it was running a washing machine and
that's going to be a big thing, I think. Here,
but it's a big thing, yeah.
And Rivian actually announced that they're going to have a bidirectional charger this year.
Right, that's so good. I mean, it's so obvious that that's a critically important aspect for if we don't take advantage of that with electric vehicles, then I kind of give up. Because if you've got 1,000 cars in a car park, a workplace, and you've got really good charging software and charging infrastructure there that can go both ways, you could run a big factory from the cars and then go off. They're going to drive home in 2 hours. Let's charge them.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I mean, it's I think the landscape of how we make and use energy is going to dramatically change in the next decade. And it's if it can happen here in the U.S., which is just a gigantic country with such a diverse landscape of economic class and everything else, if it can happen here, then it can really happen and be successful anywhere. So I'm super excited about that. I still think now your house has Tesla Powerwalls as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So here's the setup that I think is going to be the best one, at least for us here in the States, is you'll have a home battery, at least one. That will be relatively small, but could run your house for maybe 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
And because what happens is if the power were to go out, or it's just a peak load time and you want to offset your thing, you're going to want that immediate transfer. I think I remember seeing a video of you where you had a light on and you flipped it off and it didn't even flicker or, I think that's what people expect. And that's what they want. They want basically to not ever think about it, to just have it work.
Yeah.
And that requires a battery that's attached to your home, that is hardwired in and is just immediately available. Now, you don't necessarily need 15 power walls in your home mounted to it. You can have just one or two that give you everything you need. And then when it comes to, this is a more serious thing, I need to be off grid for longer. Great. That 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf or my 130 kilowatt hour Hummer EV or whatever, I just plug that thing in and I'm good for days and days and days. So I think that'll be the model. I don't think a vehicle to home will be the panacea of just, oh, I just plug my car in and everything works
Yeah.
beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're going to want to go to the store. And then
Yeah.
what? Are you going to shut off the power at your house while you're at the
Yeah.
store? That doesn't make sense. So I
No.
think there'll be sort of this hybrid of you have some sort of fixed battery there that's immediate and just works. And then this is your backup generator essentially.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's what Rivian is going to be launching. They've announced it. And I've, been bugging them nonstop to be the first guy to test it. So we'll see.
Yes.
But but I'll have more on that later. But I think that's
Yeah.
going to be a huge thing, because then if you think about the value of an electric vehicle, it's not just getting you to work and back. It's powering your home, saving you
Yeah.
money, making your home more resilient from outages, which where I live are, a fairly regular thing. Or even in,
Right.
and people can say, Californians, you guys are the worst, and that's why your power grid sucks. Meanwhile, millions of people in Texas are currently without power
Yes.
for the third time in 5 years. So
That's
I
bad,
don't
isn't
want
it?
to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it happens to all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's make our
But
lives more resilient with the tech that's available now.
but it's such a strong message. It gives out. I mean, I've witnessed this firsthand on many occasions now. When we have our live shows, we have. It depends where we are, but all the ones around in the UK, we have. I'm just trying to remember where they came to Australia. I don't think they did. But these guys who've written these amazing plant-based cookbooks called
Mm-hmm.
Bosch. There's two of them. They're really lovely guys, and they do cooking demonstrations for us. And so they have a kitchen and blenders and a freezer and all that stuff. And it's all being powered from. It usually is a Hyundai
Mm-hmm.
or a Kia, and they've got bi-directional
Yeah.
stuff that you can, like an ordinary domestic output. So they couldn't,
Power.
it's not vehicle to grid high
Yeah.
level. It's vehicle to your cooker.
Yeah.
But when you see people when they explain that we're cooking from the power from that car, and you see people in the audience go, Are they? Because you can see the wire. It comes out. The car's parked
Mm-hmm.
next to them where they are, and it goes into
Yeah.
the kitchen, and it blows them. And the amount of people I've talked to about, I didn't know you could do that with an electric. It's
Mm-hmm.
and when they work that out, when you talk to them about it, they go, "Oh my god, that is so different. That is not." Their thing is there's a petrol car or an electric car, and I've got to choose. I don't know which one. You go, oh, wait
Mm-hmm.
a minute, the petrol car. I'm not going to run my house from my gas car with it ticking over in the
Yeah.
out the front of the car, going, and it generate.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. It's a
Yeah.
really
And
interesting.
it's kind of cool because we can already sort of do that here as well. So a common thing in certain parts, I don't know if it's common over there, but over here, there's a lot of parts where you have a gas generator and your house
Yes,
has a generator plug, like an input that you can plug it into. So this
right,
exists in a lot of homes here in the U.S. And so already you can take, say, a Ford Lightning, a Ford F-150 Lightning, and it has a 30 amp, 240 volt
right,
output that could go into a generator plug. So even though
right.
it's not a bi-directional charging this and that, we sort of have that technology that
Yeah,
exists. And hopefully that opens up people's eyes to the idea that the charging infrastructure needed for electric vehicles is very different than the infrastructure we need to fuel a petrol car.
yeah, yes, yeah.
Y- you
Oh,
know, tell me. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I want to do so. One of the things is, the grid would fail if we had all electric cars, and we
yeah,
don't have enough charging plugs and all that. And it's sort of a pedantic argument. I really hate when people try to do this because they try to put all these criteria about
yeah,
what they mean in order for them to be right. And that's human nature in a way,
yeah.
but also it's kind of stupid. So if I wanted to take the same logic and say, okay, cool, how many physical places can you possibly fuel a gas car in the US? Just
Right.
every single pump. If you added them all up, let's call
Yeah,
it 500,000. Let's call it a million. If I were to do that same logic, that same thought experiment, and say, how many physical places can I plug in an electric car to in the United States?
yeah.
It's in the trillions.
It's going to be in the trillions.
Because
Yeah,
in my studio I'm sitting in right now, I have
yeah,
7 of them. And in your
yeah,
home or your
yeah,
office right there, you've got 12 of them.
yeah,
In
yeah,
my home, I've got 100 of them.
yeah,
So people don't understand that in a regular outlet, I can plug in and get
yeah,
power. It may be
yeah,
slow, it may not be
yeah.
ideal, but you cannot do that with a gas car. So is that a stupid argument? Should I not make that video? I think it's kind of funny.
I think that's a good argument. I think it's a good argument. I mean, I'm thinking, there'll always be people who, because I still get those comments now. I don't want an electric car where if I need to do a journey I do regularly, 600 miles, I don't want to stop and charge for 5 hours. And you go, well, you won't. But why am I even talking to you? And why am I even reading what you've written? Because it's just irrelevant. But what I'm about to do, because I am going to do, because the other one is it's awkward because it's slightly personal, but it's the bladder range argument. And this has become very pertinent for me because I actually had a very serious infection in 2019. I was hospitalized, and I had a bladder infection, which turned into sepsis, which a lot of people die from. I was very lucky for it to be caught in time. And it wasn't because I was driving a long way and not having a wee. It was more complicated. And it's all resolved now. I'm fine. But I've worked out that my bladder range is under 200 miles.
Yeah.
But in comfort, that I'll drive for 3 hours and I'll go, I really need to stop.
Yeah, we should
I shouldn't have had that coffee before we left. That was a mistake. I need to stop.
Yeah.
And then you realize that all the cars I've driven recently go way past that. So their range is beyond human range. There is, I think I don't want to call it bladder range, call it human range.
Yeah.
And legally, I don't know about in the United States, but in Europe and in this country, you have to, if you're driving a big truck, you have to stop every 3 hours.
Oh, yeah,
it's
interesting.
the law. It's either 3 or 4 hours. It's not 10 hours or 8 hours. It's 3 or 4 hours, and you have to stop for 45 minutes.
Wow, that's a long time
to have a break. It's and there's tachographs. There's all this equipment in the truck that you're legally obliged to be running, and you can get fined if you don't run it. And you can get a fine, because you want drivers of big trucks like that to be safe. You don't want them falling asleep. Bloody obvious. And
I don't know. I don't know if I'm sure someone could tell us in the comments, but I do have my wife's cousin is a truck driver, so I could ask him.
Right. Yeah, because I think there are similar rules. There are definitely rulings in the United States, but that was one of the things we saw recently was a big battery electric truck drove from Denmark to Le Mans for the Le Mans race, carrying a load of racing cars. I'm guessing. I don't even know what it was doing. Yeah. But it was the biggest trucks we can have on the road in Europe, and that had to stop for the driver before it needed to stop to charge. And that was really interesting.
That's amazing.
To know that's already the case. And 3/4 of an hour, it had 2 400 kilowatt chargers either side, I think.
Wow.
And that charged it enough to do the rest of the journey, in 3/4 of an hour.
Is that Volvo that made those?
I think it was a Volvo truck or a Daimler. No, I think that was a Volvo. That was
a few weeks back. I went to. I got invited to Los Angeles to the port where they bring in all the shipping stuff.
Right.
And Volvo had an event there with Amazon, and they were showing off their electric trucks that they brought in. It's funny because then I got to sit inside of it and all that, and it's just a regular truck. It was like nothing except I'm like, what am I supposed to show? It wasn't the Tesla Semi where you're like, whoa, it was just like, so cool. This is just a regular truck. I got it.
It's basically a truck. They've taken the diesel and engine out and the tank out. I mean, we drove some Mercedes ones like that recently. I drove the biggest one that they do.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is that they said, and all the drivers, the regular truck drivers who said it, when it's just so much easier to drive.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have driven one for a TV show years ago, a big truck. And it took me, and this was not on public roads. I'm not allowed to drive on, but it's on a private circuit. But and I'd forgotten quite how many it was. It was 16 gears. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God! This one, you put it in drive and you go,
and that's
this huge thing. I mean, this was the biggest truck that is allowed on European roads. That's enormous.
Amazing. That'll absolutely be, and in the video we started off talking about, I kind of made that point too, that I'm maybe different than some in that I still today, in terms of how the technology exists, I still think that there are places for gas and diesel vehicles today.
Right.
I don't think that'll be forever, but absolutely, in fact, at the Fully Charged San Diego that we did a few years back, a guy came up to me and he's a fan of the show and all this, and he was asking about, he's a cattle rancher in Texas, and he loves electric vehicles, and he can't wait to replace his diesel Ford whatever that he is a fifth wheel where the trailer mounts in the bed. He was really asking me, is there anything that can do that? And I'm like, I don't think so right now. So, and I look at it and go, man, you're hauling cattle across Texas, which is the size,
quite big.
It's like the size of half of Europe, just the one.
Yes,
I mean, it is gigantic.
Yeah.
So it's anyway. So cases like that. So I'm not really anti gas vehicles in that sense. I think they still have utility. I'm anti them for the person that just takes their kid to school and goes and gets groceries. That is a solved issue. But we will get there. So it's an exciting thing to see these electric trucks and the big stuff, because that is sort of the hardest nut to crack, I feel. That, and then aviation and shipping. But I think I've seen some of your videos doing that. That's all coming, right? Aviation might be the hardest one.
Aviation. I mean, the thing is that when you look at the statistics and the actual impact, and I mean, that's why there's a great site called Our World in Data that
I love
may be aware of. But when we've interviewed Hannah Ritchie, who works for them, and just that when they break that all down, it's essentially, if you look at all human activity, then all flying, so cargo as well as passengers, 2% of our CO2 out. And you go, let's do the 40%, which is ground transport. Let's sort that one first.
Well,
because we've got the technology that is more than adequate to do that. And
absolutely, And when you look at aviation, it's 2%, and it's also the hardest 2%.
So hard.
So like, okay, let's keep working, but let's not put all of our effort into that. Let's work on the other stuff that is the sort of the low hanging fruit. Absolutely.
I've just got it because I want to wind up soon. But we've got to do another. Can we do another one quite soon, Ben? But I've got to I'm available for you anytime, Robert. I've got to ask about the Hummer, because I watched your Hummer episode. Because it's the least likely vehicle that we're ever going to get in the UK.
Yes.
But I loved it, and I love the fact that your wife loved it, and your kids weren't that keen when the roof was off. Because I didn't know the roof came. It looks amazing, and the shots of you driving in Californian sunshine with your roof down, it's just what an
it doesn't
awesome
get
machine.
better. They absolutely. I was very critical of the Hummer when I first saw it at the launch event, because I thought, man, you could have taken all the energy and effort you put into this and made something so much more useful.
15 smaller cars.
Like, to me, I was like, what are you guys doing? But I'm happy to say I was wrong. They absolutely made a Halo vehicle that a LeBron James, a pro athlete, can drive and go, oh my God, this is amazing. And because that person does that, other people are going to follow, and they're not going to be able to afford or want or need that exact one. But now their mind is shifted of, oh, maybe I should get the electric Silverado or the Chevy Equinox EV, whatever it is. But the Hummer EV, I was pleasantly surprised. I'd been putting it off. I get emails from the car makers. Hey, we've got this new one in. Do you want to try it out for a week? 9 times out of 10, I say, no, I'm not interested in the new Nissan Leaf or something. I'm just sorry. I'm not going to make a video on it. I'm not going to enjoy driving it. This one, I was like, okay, fine. Let's try it. I think it's going to be stupid. I don't think I'm going to like it. From the moment it showed up, I was all smiles and just thoroughly enjoyed it. Taking the top off, seeing my wife's reaction, because she is very unimpressed by electric vehicles. Generally speaking,
good. Like, it's a very healthy attitude.
It's a very well. I mean, she has her Tesla. She's been driving nothing but electric cars since 2018.
Yeah,
and so the Rivian came out, and she's like, "Oh, this is nice." Every other electric car I've got, she's going, "Meh, whatever." Yeah. It's not my Model Y. It's not the model, whatever. But that one, she was the same way from the moment we got it. Just all smiles. It has its flaws and its shortcomings. But man, and I'll tell you, I got a lot of people asking questions about that. Nowadays, where I live, the Rivian doesn't bring any eyeballs and no one cares. It's just another truck. The Cybertruck gets a lot of attention, as it can't not get attention.
Can't help doing,
but man, the Hummer, the range on it's good. The tech on it's good. It supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which I'm a fan of. The taking the roof off, it was just a blast. I mean, it is so fun, and I think that's sort of missing. Electric cars in the early days were all fun and exciting. Every time there was a new anything, it was the biggest news on the planet. And oh my God, we got to check that out. It's going to be so groundbreaking. And I feel like we've sort of crossed into the mainstream where
Yeah.
here's another electric car and it's sort of
Slightly
boring.
better than the one last year. Yes.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
kind of, it has all the same features all the other ones have. It's nothing.
Yeah.
So the fact that that one was unique and different, the crab walk, all that stuff. The four-wheel steering, actually, I'm very jealous of. I still prefer my Rivian for a lot of reasons, but man, the turning radius on this vehicle, which is just gigantic.
Huge.
It is enormous. The turning radius is like a Model 3 or something. That thing can just turn on a dime because all four wheels can turn. Which is absolutely necessary, for that thing. But I can see a lot of people loving it. And then when you look at the price point of it, yes, it's an expensive vehicle at $100,000, $105,000.
Right.
But show me a car that competes with this in the gas world that's not well over $100,000. I mean, a Range Rover is $140,000, and it's not even close to as cool or as fun. So the Hummer EV was a very pleasant surprise. My wife loved it. My kids, they enjoyed it, but they certainly didn't like having the top down going on the freeway because it's all the air is just hitting them. They're going, just stop. They can't. But it was a blast. Yeah. I mean, I even wanted to keep it for longer. I was just really enjoyed that whole thing, and then as soon as it can charge on the Tesla supercharger network, that'll be it.
Right.
It'll be,
that was the other interesting thing that I forgot, because I have the last time I used the supercharger network in the States was quite a while ago, and it was on a Model S, which I was driving somewhere, many years ago. And then I saw your video of when you charged the Rivian. On because the big difference between Tesla in Europe and Tesla in USA is all Tesla's superchargers here are CCS. They're already, it's compatible in terms of its fittings. It fits any car. And we've now got I used one today, multiple new supercharger bays that are open to any car.
Oh, really?
And so that it's become very common, and in most, and I think in the EU, what you see on the map is they're all for any car, and except for that one there, which is Tesla only. That's very rare that it's Tesla only. It's mostly, and I think there's a legal requirement. I can't even remember. There's been some law passed, and I think and now
isn't Mercedes doing that, where they have their own charging network they're building?
They are starting to, which I haven't seen. So I'm driving in France in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm sort of trying to my main ambition. The car. The distance. Hang on, which charger can I try out? How difficult is it to use? But that was.
That's a big deal here. I'm going on a road trip. 2/3 of the way up California next week with my family. And we just got our official Rivian Tesla adapter.
Right.
And I am thrilled by this because it really wasn't a problem before. I just had to plan more. But on my previous times on the same road trip, if the chargers didn't work, it could have been a problem. It could have been bad. Because there's stretches of a couple 100 miles where there's nothing around. So now, now there's 5 Tesla supercharging stations, so zero chance I'll have an issue.
And this is the thing that I guess I don't want to whine on, but it's so difficult that I've had. It's not so much now in this country. It's not so much that the chargers fail; they're working, but you cannot communicate with them because you've got to have the right app and the right card. Still, most of them now, all the new ones, you just tap to pay in this country. They all new ones have to be tap to pay capable. And so those are good if you get the old, and then you go, oh, I've got the app, I don't even know what's the app. And you're there for like 10 minutes trying, and it's charging, eventually. And whereas always Tesla, I just walk up to it, plug the damn thing in. I've got the Tesla app, I go flip, charge non-Tesla, boom, it's charging, and I don't even think about it.
Oh, do you have to do that?
Yeah, I use the app. It says charge your non-Tesla.
But
you have a setting on the app, so that's how you activate. You can also tap to pay with a credit card or a debit card.
So here we have I think a lot of the cars, I think Ford, Rivian for sure, they have, and a bunch of others, they have plug and charge. And so you don't have to do that. Even at Electrify America and stuff, although Electrify America's network isn't all like on the same version of charging and software, so it's kind of a weird mosaic. But if you like when I charged my Rivian for the first time, testing it on the supercharger network, I did nothing. I just walked
Right, you
up,
just plug
plugged
it
it
in and
in,
it does it.
and I have in my Rivian app, I have my credit card and all that payment
Right.
information set up.
So it's coming through there.
And
Right.
so the Tesla's network and the Rivian plug and charge software just talked. I literally
Yeah.
did zero.
That's
So
what you want. Yeah.
yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, this is
Yeah.
going to be a deal, I think, here, and because there's been a lot of people, and forget whether people like or dislike Tesla because of politics or this or that.
Yeah.
They just don't offer every possible option for every person. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of cars that just are better for one reason or
Yeah.
another for a person, and
Yeah.
I think Hyundai and Kia were recently spotted charging at a supercharger.
Right.
GM is I think they've already announced, and it should be coming soon.
Right.
So very soon, that barrier to entry of what do I do if I need to drive 2,000
Yeah.
miles next week? What do I do? Well, that's solved now for
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, Tesla already has the vast majority of cars on the road here,
Yeah.
so it's already sort of been a solved issue, but now it's going to be even more solved. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a really exciting thing for us here in the States.
No. And look, damn, I was trying to be all professional and not go over an hour. And we've done 1 hour and
please,
1 minute and 5 seconds.
I'm here for you, Robert. Anytime. I have
that's great.
all the time in the world.
That's no, but that's we've got to. I mean, hopefully we'll. I don't know if you can come up to Vancouver. I don't even know. I have nothing to do with the live show, so every now and then I learn that someone is going to be there or isn't going to be there, and I feel very. But I mean, it would be great to see you.
We'll actually be. I would love that, but we'll actually be in Italy at the time.
Wow.
So
it's not so bad. It's not a bad place to be.
Yeah. This is as you get older, you don't get invited to as many weddings anymore.
Yes.
And so, I'm 42 years old now, and it's like the few and far between the invites. It's all divorces and all other things happening. So, some of our good friends that are a bit younger, they're getting married in Lake Como. At the same time, and so I said, okay, I've never had a better reason to go to Lake Como. Not that I ever needed one to begin with, but now I have an even better reason. So I'll be over, I guess, closer to where you're at during that time. So I hope you guys have a good show, and hopefully you come back to the States sometime after that. Because
I really hope so. Yeah, there's been some talk about it that I might be involved in, but it would be great. I mean, the Vancouver show was the amount of Americans I met in Vancouver was amazing. Who'd driven from one couple had driven their a Chevy Bolt from Austin, Texas.
Oh wow,
to Vancouver.
Good for them.
It took them some days, but they did a big road trip and they loved it and they were so.
There is a whole weird thing that happens with electric road trips that you go to places and you see things that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And
no, exactly.
It's pretty. It's a special thing if people haven't done it. They get to go see the world or see wherever part of the world they're in from a different perspective.
But that's been. Look, we will catch up soon, whatever. Because that was, and I've subscribed to your new. Oh, tell me the name of your podcast so people can know, because that is so good. I mean,
the daily Charge Up. It's a daily podcast about just it's a quick 5 to 6 minutes about what's going on in the EV world. I try to add context from. I add my take to at least one story, but otherwise it's basically just the facts. BYD is doing this, or Stellantis is doing this, Tesla's doing it. A lot of times, well, like today's episode was all Tesla because it was the earnings call yesterday and all this. But we if it's a Tesla, Rivian, or Lucid story, those are usually the big ones. Otherwise, but we try to bring in everything. It is very US centric, but we do cover things specifically with like the Chinese companies and all that. Which I just saw another company, Zeekr, from China is now in Mexico, and I happen to live about 10 minutes from Mexico, so I'm actually very keen on contacting them and saying, hey, any chance I can come and see? I would love to. I've got to do a quick name drop because it was such a lovely moment. I was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed last week, really big automotive event in the UK. And I was at the ball, which is all it's a black tie and everyone's in evening dress. It's a huge event, absolutely huge. And suddenly a lovely man came up to me and he said, "Are you Robert?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, hello, I'm Peter Rawlinson from Lucid." Oh, yeah.
And the amazing thing was, as we were driving up in a Genesis, it was very nice. We got an electric Genesis. to arrive at the ball, I noticed a Lucid. First time I'd seen one in LA. First time I'd seen one in the UK.
Yeah.
Coming behind us. Well, that was him. He was driving. I didn't see him. And he's such an amazing guy, and I was so excited to see how they do. I mean, they're the ones I'm kind of really fingers crossed they can make it to the.
They'll be fine. I think the challenge I find with Lucid, and I'm a big fan of Peter as well. I think he's fantastic. He's again another one of those CEOs that's like the perfect guy for that job.
Yeah.
Such a great engineer. I mean, I think he was the chief engineer on the Model S, right? So
he was.
Yeah. So he knows all this stuff, and he's so humble and so thoughtful and all that and everything. Great guy. I think the challenge they have is, they're going after the luxury market. Objectively, which Tesla is not in the traditional sense a luxury brand. So they weren't coming after Tesla, but I think the Tesla people got real testy about the whole situation. They were going after Mercedes and BMW. And unfortunately for Lucid, Mercedes and BMW now make very good electric cars. And they're selling very well. So I think it's one of those questions of, who is their customer? Because if you're a luxury auto buyer, and let's say you've had the S-Class electric version for, that's all you've had for 20 years, and now you want an electric one, are you going to go on this sort of startup that's relatively unproven, or are you going to buy the electric S-Class from Mercedes? Of course, that's what you're going to buy. So I think if I were to sit down and consult with them, I would want to know what are you going to do to convince these longtime Mercedes, BMW owners that you're the better option? You're not going to get the Tesla buyers. You're not going to get the technophiles because you're not tech enough. But they do have the fastest production car in the world, the Lucid Air Sapphire, by a long shot. So they have a lot going for them. But I think it's still they haven't broken through yet.
No.
They need the gravity or something else to really hit the main conversation, because I don't think they're even in the conversation currently.
Yeah. No, there's still if the fact that you and I know about Lucid puts us in a special niche category, because I think there's a hell of a lot of people who've never heard of them and don't know anything
and I
about
see them all over. Where I live, there's a lot of them. But still, it's a tough sell, I think, for a lot of people that are in that space.
Ben, I've got to go. I've got to let you go. I'm just trying to work out now. I've made a note. How often can we do this?
As often
just to
as
remind myself, because it's great fun. It's so lovely to catch up with you, and
absolutely.
And we'll be in touch soon. But it's been really, thank you for your amazing input and time and knowledge. It's been a real joy talking to you.
Oh, same to you, Robert. It's always a pleasure.
Great stuff. Take care. Really hope you enjoyed that. I just have great fun talking to him. And he's going to come back. We're going to get him on as a regular guest because he's so good. But that's all. I'm not going to say anything else. As always, if you have been, thank you for watching and listening.